Thanks for tuning in to the Michael Lofton Show here on Reason and Theology. On a Friday, I want to talk about the question of will Pope Francis bless same sex unions in the upcoming synod. There's a lot of talk about this, and I think that there are some things that need to be addressed here, quite a few, in fact, especially with the recent appointment of Archbishop Fernandez to the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and also in light of some comments that he's made about same-sex unions. And let me first just start out with this. Somebody sent me a link to a website by a church historian recently who posted that Francis isn't the Pope. This is a Catholic church historian who says Pope Francis isn't the Pope. And what he did is he posted all of these various quotes, most of the quotes that, in fact, I use to support the papacy, especially the ones in the first millennium when engaging Eastern Orthodox. Well, he posts all of those things showing that the Holy See will be undefiled, and it's not just in its teachings that are infallible, but that the see itself will be undefiled. And he says, well, if Pope Francis is Pope, then all of these people are wrong. The Sixth Ecumenical Council is wrong. This council is wrong. This church father is wrong. This saint is wrong. This pope is wrong, because all these popes are defending the see of Rome in its acts, saying that it will be undefiled until the end, again, to use the language of the Sixth Ecumenical Council. And by the way, if you want a good detail of that, especially in light of Pope Honorius, I have multiple videos on that. I'll include those in the show notes. But the point is this. I fear what's going to happen is, if people really buy into this idea that the Pope is an enemy of tradition and is opposing tradition, they're going to be just like this historian, where they're going to say, well, if that's the case, then all of these other guys are wrong. And now, of course, he's going to say, well, they're not wrong, therefore Pope Francis isn't the Pope. And I fear that that's what's going to happen with a lot of people. They're going to hear all this stuff that Pope Francis is going to bless sin and he's going to change doctrine. And they're going to say, well, that can't be true if all these other things about the papacy are true. Therefore, Pope Francis is not the Pope. And that's why you're seeing guys left and right becoming sedevacantists, saying Pope Francis isn't the Pope, saying the see is vacant. Some of them haven't formally done so. They are closet sedevacantists, so in private they will say that they're sedevacantists, but they won't say it in public because they don't want to lose their platform and lose the ears of quite a few people who would shut them off at that point. And so they'll say pretty much everything that leads up to the fact that they're promoting sedevacantism, but they won't actually go that far. There you have those. And then you have some others who are just explicitly saying, hey, yeah, I'm a sedevacantist, or I believe Pope Francis is not the Pope, or he's an anti-Pope, or the see is vacant, or whatever they want to say. It will effectively be along those same lines. That's why, however, you're seeing this. Because, again, they're looking at all of these quotes about the papacy, and they're saying, hey, it's not matching up with Pope Francis. And I want to say, wait, retrace your steps here. A lot of the claims that you've bought into about Pope Francis are false. And so that's kind of where the problem is. But yeah, if you really do believe that Pope Francis is, at odds and at war with tradition, it's only a matter of time before you're going to leave the church and become a sedevacantist and say that, Pope Francis isn't the Pope. Now, they'll still say that they're part of the church, but of course, they're obviously in schism whenever you deny that Pope Francis isn't the Pope. So there's that issue. Now, as far as will Pope Francis bless same-sex unions, I'm going to share my screen. I want to answer this, but I also want to say I'm going to give you a short answer and then a longer answer, because there's a couple angles that we need to tackle this from. Number one, will he bless same-sex unions? The answer to that is going to be, I believe no. First of all, because of the protection that is there for the papacy, but number two, because Pope Francis himself has already signed a document saying no. Again, this is a document from 2021, March 15th. Response of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith to a dubium regarding the blessing of the unions of persons of the same sex. It is explicit the church cannot bless sin. It says why. It gives great argumentation for that stance. And then it notes the sovereign pontiff Francis, at the audience granted to the undersigned secretary, was informed and gave his assent to the publication of the above. So it is now papal magisterium. So this thing is not just put out by the congregation. This is papal magisterium. This is Pope Francis's Pope Francis's answer to will he bless same-sex unions. The answer is going to be no. Unless he's going to radically depart from this, which I don't see him doing. But I actually think it's more complex than that. And I'll explain why. Will he bless same-sex unions? No. And yes, I will put a link to this in the article. I see somebody's asking. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes. I see you, Jesse, asking for that. That's fine. Will he bless same-sex unions? No. But I don't think that's the end of the story. Because there's another difficulty here. And that is, what I think is going to happen is some people are going to say, okay, well, we're not saying bless the same-sex union itself. We're saying, can we bless the good that is in these unions? Not the union itself, not those things that are sinful, but can we bless the good that is in them? Such as perhaps if there's a same-sex union out there and both partners are dedicated to monogamy, they're dedicated to fidelity to each other and not cheating on each other. I could honestly see some people suggest, well, can we bless those good aspects? Monogamy is a good thing, right? Or being faithful to one another, that's a good thing, right? Or friendships, can we bless those things that in and of themselves are good while not blessing the sin, and definitely not saying that this is sacramental? You see how some people, I think, are going to try to sneak this in. And they're going to say, but see, we're not blessing same-sex unions. And okay, very technically, you're not blessing the union, but you're blessing something virtuous in a disordered context, which is going to amount to the same thing at the end of the day. Because number one, it will give everybody the same exact impression that you're blessing this. They're going to get the same impression that you're just blessing the union itself. And then number two, those things that in and of themselves may be virtuous, monogamy, fidelity, friendship, or whatever, those in and of themselves may be good, but you can't consider them in an isolated context. You have to consider them in the context in which they're in. And in the context in which they're in, that's not a good thing. Look, if I am yoked to Baal and I am faithful to Baal, that's not a good thing, right? Is being faithful good? Is monogamy good? Yeah, but if it's to a pagan god who's a demon, it's different because of the context of the monogamy and fidelity, right? I mean, if I go through some satanic cult ritual and devote myself to Satan, and I am faithful to Satan, and I am somehow wedded to Satan in some occult ceremony or something, can that be blessed? No. For the exact same reason you can't bless it in these other contexts. Because again, it amounts to the same thing, even if you want to say, but we're not blessing the union. Okay, you're not blessing the union, but you are blessing something. This shouldn't be blessed to begin with, because those things that may be virtuous in and of themselves are taking place in a context that is disordered. And so they're worthless at that point. They are of no value, and they are not to be blessed. And so that's how I think some are going to try to sneak this in the door. So the answer is going to be no to same-sex blessings. Pope Francis has already said that. But are some people, are they going to try to argue for something like I just said? They're going to qualify it. We're going to speak about the good things that are found in these unions, and we're only blessing those, but we're going to make it clear we're not blessing same-sex unions themselves. Are they going to try to make those distinctions? I imagine some people are going to try to propose that. I'm already getting the impression that that's kind of what the German bishops are trying to push forward. Um, and I don't think that that should be allowed any more than I think that you could bless a monogamous and faithful union to Satan. Or let me give you another example. Can the church bless Satan? Now, you would automatically say, no, of course not. Oh, but hold on. Wait. Now, hold on. Now, Satan has being, right? He exists. Okay, well, isn't existence a good according to Catholic philosophy? Well, existence is a good. Sure. Oh, well, can we bless the good of the existence of Satan? You see how absurd this can become. It would be absurd to say, oh, yeah, well, we're not blessing Satan, but we're going to bless his existence. And existence is a good thing, right? So can we now have a ceremony to bless the existence of Satan because existence in and of itself is a good thing? No, because the way in which he's existing is a bad thing, right? That's kind of the problem here. He's not just existing, he's existing in a way that is opposing himself to God, that is in opposition to God. Well, likewise, same-sex unions. Might you talk about monogamy and fidelity in some of these relationships? Sure. In isolation, are those good? Yes. But when you put them in this context, those are not working for good. Those are not helpful things. They're actually continuing to keep a person in a sinful relationship. So, again, Pope Francis, I think he's going to say no to the blessings, but I think what will be debated is whether or not you can bless good things in these relationships, which I want to say, though you may try to make a distinction here between good things and the union itself, it's going to amount to the same thing in the eyes of the vast majority of people. And also it's nonsensical for the reasons why I just mentioned here. Now, I want to take a look at this interview from Archbishop Fernandez, who is the new head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. And I want to offer some pushback to some things that he says in the interview. I totally get where he's coming from, completely makes sense, but I'm going to offer some pushback and show you where I think some of the some of the direction that he might try to take this discussion might not be helpful. And I'll explain why. I'm going to skip down to the part where he has an interview and he's talking about the question of the magisterium and blessing same-sex unions, stuff like that. So here's what the question is. Some are clearly uncomfortable with this change in approach and fear that theological dialogue will lead to a change in the church's most important teachings and doctrines. And I'll certainly say, no, dialogue in and of itself doesn't do that. Such as its teachings on marriage and homosexuality. Do you consider these teachings open to change? What does dialogue on issues such as these mean for you? So they're asking in the context, okay, you know, you're in September, you're going to be in office for the head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. One of the things that right now is being discussed is blessing same-sex unions, which his congregation with the Pope's teaching authority already said, no, you can't do this. So it already closed the door on it. But they ask him about it. And he says this, all of the church's teachings have enormous richness. To me, it sounds a bit vain to believe that one has everything clear on these issues. Now, I don't know anybody who's taken the position that we've somehow exhausted the mysteries of all of God's teachings. I don't know anybody who takes that position. And the exciting mystery of human lives is in play, where not everything is mathematics. Is theology not identical to mathematics? Sure. Are some things clear-cut? Are some things black and white? Yeah. Are some things not? Sure. But he goes on. Did not St. Thomas Aquinas say that the more one descends into particulars, the more confused God's will becomes? And he was not a relativist. We have a lot to learn about so many things, and let's say it very clearly. The doctrine of the gospel does not change. but our understanding of it does change, and changes a lot. Now, in and of itself, I understand what he's getting at here, because that actually is a true statement in theology. The doctrine doesn't change. The meaning of the proposition doesn't change. Vatican I, in fact, has an anathema for those who would deny that. So the meaning of the proposition doesn't change. The doctrine doesn't change. Does our understanding of it in some cases develop? Yeah. Yes, that's undeniable. That is part of the development of doctrine. Now, when we say change here, though, we're talking organic change. We're not talking some kind of formal rupture in the substantial teachings of the deposit of faith. No, you can't have that. If you had that, you would no longer be preserving the deposit of faith. It would no longer be intact. So when we talk about change here in reference to the doctrines of the gospel, which I presume he's referring to definitive teachings, we can only speak of change in the sense of organic development and our understanding of them, but nothing substantial. Like you can't go from X to denying X. That would be a corruption. But he clarifies this a little bit. Similarly, Pope Francis, like many before him, has often used the phrase development of doctrine. This makes some people nervous because for them, development means change. Well, let me stop there. I mean, develop does mean change, but it doesn't mean a substantial change. That's where we need to make sure we're making the proper distinctions. Changes that are accidental in nature? Yeah, we certainly have that in 2,000 years of development of doctrine in church history. But not substantial change in definitive teachings of the church. That is, things that belong to the deposit of faith. Those cannot substantially change. So you may have accidental changes, but not substantial changes. So when we say change here, we need to define what kind of change we're referring to. And that's where I think some people get lost, because they automatically assume a substantial change, a corruption. That's not what is being discussed here. How do you understand doctrine? And therefore, how would you describe the process when doctrine develops? Okay. The meaning, as I was telling you, is development in our understanding of doctrine. But normally this leads to a change in the expression of doctrine. And that's certainly true. We even see with Mysterium Ecclesiae in the 70s, where the CDF spoke of this. And this is actually a constant thing that we can find, where the way in which we express doctrine has certainly changed over time. Again, the doctrine itself, the meaning, the proposition has remained the same, but we certainly do express things a little differently, and just depending on what age of church history that we're in. Not substantial differences, though, but expressions that are different nonetheless. But normally this leads to a change in the expression of doctrine, since a greater understanding requires that the language needs to be adjusted or enriched in order to express what has been better understood. Sure. That is, the expression of doctrine is also developed. Yeah, so far so good. I don't have a problem with that in and of itself, because that's certainly true. On the other hand, if we assume the Pope's constant concern to achieve an evangelizing objective and a pastoral sensitivity, we can say that the form, the expression, becomes part of the content, because it can make it difficult to understand. For example, saying that God is immutable is correct and indisputable, but it must complement that expression with others, since when today many people hear that, they understand that God is boring or that he is deprived of dynamism. I guess that's just a different part of the world. I've never heard of somebody reacting to the doctrine of the immutability of God in that way. But I'm just in the United States, so I don't know what it's like elsewhere. Something similar occurs when we say that in Christ there is only one divine person, the Son, not a human person. I get what he's trying to say here. I totally get it. That is dogma, but one ought to enrich that expression with others to avoid it being misunderstood, or that it is understood that Christ is not true man. Right. So he's guarding the hypostatic union here, and guarding against those who would say the Chalcedonian formula would be, Nestorian in nature, or would be a denial of somehow the humanity of Christ or the divinity of Christ. And so you want to make a very important distinctions here. You want to say that you have one divine person, two human natures, yet these natures are not They're not divided, as if they're just completely separate, but they're also not mixed and intermingled as if they're fused together and they are somehow one third nature now. No, they're still distinct. And so you have to really walk a fine line there. So I get the analogy that he's using here. He says this can help in understanding why the Pope wanted a prefect who was a theologian, but also a parish priest, catechist, and teacher connected with this is an issue on which Francis has insisted a lot, the hierarchy of truths, which implies not only a certain order of importance, but also that some truths are understood in light of others. Now, that's certainly the case with the hierarchy of truths. I don't have an issue with that. But here's the thing. We can talk about development. We could talk about change in expressions. We could talk about those things. But I fear people are going to push for more than that. That's the problem. We're not just talking about enriching the deposit of faith when we're talking about same-sex blessings. That's not what we're discussing. We're not talking about making the proper distinctions. That's not what we're discussing. We're talking about blessing sin, and that's the problem. Now I know he has more to say, and we're going to actually take a look at it here in a moment. He does have more to say on this issue, but I want to point that out. I want to note that, well, yes, we can grant this discussion of developing one's expression of theology, the church's expression of theology, and organic change. We can have that discussion. There's nothing wrong with that. But I fear that what's taking place is people are asking for more than that in this question of blessing same-sex unions or blessing the good found in such unions, such as fidelity or something like that. He does mention, before we go to the next part and I interact with that further, he does mention something else here about social media in the United States that I thought was interesting. In some of your social media posts, you have said that there are some Catholics in the United States who have criticized you in some of your writings, including your past booklet on kissing, in order to criticize the Pope. Do you think that is due to a misunderstanding of yourself and Francis? What misunderstanding do you think Catholics in the United States have about this papacy, and how can they be clarified? He says you have to say some Americans, as in the case with some Spaniards, French, and Poles, for example. In the United States, the population is very well educated, and the enormous, well, I don't know about that one. And the enormous development that the United States had in just a few decades speaks of the great capacity of that people. Maybe of some Americans, but I don't know. I'm constantly baffled by so the incapacity to think clearly among some Americans. It would never occur to me to disparage such a noble and capable people. Oh, okay, fair enough. But there are also minorities that can be inclined to fanaticism. Yeah. To hatred. And this leads to a partial gaze that only seeks the dark side of enemies. Fair enough. I think that's true. When this is added to the fact that these minorities have a lot of economic power, it is possible that they achieve greater impact in the media and social networks. Also true. Many times it is not evil, it is passion. I disagree with them. In fact, I think a lot of times it actually is evil. It's more than just passion. It's evil. And therefore I do not judge them. Well, okay, but God does. But I must say that some assessments of the Holy Father and even of my person are unfair and not very objective. Well, that was a very, very kind way to respond to that. I'm not so sure I would have been that nice. He says it's no secret that the criticism will likely continue as not everyone shares your view. What would you like to say to those who are skeptical about the way in which you will carry out the task you are undertaking? He says that I am not a Freemason. Oh boy. How many times do we see that, right? How many times do we see every problem out there leads back to Freemasonry? Do you know how many times I've been accused of being a Freemason? It's incredible. So he says that I'm not a Freemason, nor an ally of the New World Order, nor a Soros spy infiltrated in the church. I like this. I like this comment. I appreciate that. I appreciate the humor here. Sounds like he's been watching some YouTubers, or at least is familiar with them. Those are pure fantasies. I will try to be an honest person. I confess often I love the church and its doctrine. Most of my writings are about spirituality and prayer. I cannot conceive my life without God. so they have confidence, and it is better to look for enemies of the faith elsewhere. Fair enough. I think that's all good and fine, and I appreciate that. I do, however, have some pushback against the Archbishop that I want to offer charitably here, with all due respect. I think that, I think that there's some things to push back on when it comes to his position here on same-sex unions. This is an article written by The Pillar. It's called New DDF Prefect Addresses Confusion Over Same-Sex Blessings. All right, so it says, the new head of the Vatican's doctrinal office has said that he is opposed to same-sex blessings that feed confusion over the nature of marriage. Okay, all right. But he suggests that blessings that did not create such confusion should be analyzed and confirmed. That's where I'm going to have to say, with all due respect, I'm going to offer some pushback here, and I think he's wrong. I understand. I get what he's trying to do. He's wanting to, and we're going to see in the article where he's coming from. He's wanting to make sure that we are respecting good that can come from these controversies. If you look at historically, all of these various theological controversies that we had, good has always come from them. The Arian controversy, good came from it, the Council of Nicaea. And we had to fine-tune our articulation of the divinity and consubstantiality of Jesus. And when that council did not really address the Holy Spirit, we had to have another council to address that. And then after that, Ephesus did a good job in addressing the issue of the Virgin Mary being the Theotokos and what that entailed Christologically, but it didn't address some other aspects to Christology. And so we had to have the Fourth Ecumenical Council to address that. And then some controversies came from the Fourth Ecumenical Council because they didn't really do a good job in one particular area, that is with the 3 chapters. And so then we had to call the Fifth Ecumenical Council to address that one. And, there was some more controversies after that, especially on the 2 wills of Jesus. And so we had to have the Sixth Ecumenical Council called to put down that controversy and address that, and good came from it. And then after that, we have an issue with icons. And so, all right, we now have to address that issue, and good came from it. Now, what he's going to indicate, and we're going to see here in the article, is he's going to say, in all of these controversies, there's good that can come from them. They help us to fine-tune our theology. That's true. Again, that's the story of the first 7 ecumenical councils for sure. That's certainly the story of the Reformation. The reformers really did cause the Catholic Church to fine-tune some things, which I think the Council of Trent did, and it did very, very well. And it, even to this day, we still are benefiting from the wisdom of the Council of Trent and the Counter-Reformation. But it was only in the midst of that controversy that came from the good, that is. And fine-tuning our theology and the way we express ourselves, and the way we talk about faith or justification, and a number of things, the way we perceive Scripture. So some good things came from that. And I do want to point out that, in the midst of these controversies, we do have to recognize the Spirit is at work, and he's going to help us as the church to fine-tune our theology. That's going to happen from heretics or controversies in the church. That's all good and well, but I do have some problems, and you'll see that here in a second. Let's continue. Archbishop Victor Manuel Fernandez made the remarks in an interview published July 5th by the Spanish Catholic website Info Vaticana. The Argentine bishop, who will take up the post of prefect for the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith in mid-September, was asked if he agreed with the Dicastery's 2021 declaration, the one I just showed you earlier, where Pope Francis and the Dicastery said, you cannot bless sin. The church cannot bless sin. Published with specific papal approbation, which said that the church does not have and cannot have the power to bless unions of persons of the same sex. Again, let that sink in as we're having this discussion. Pope Francis has already explicitly said no to this. So anybody suggesting Pope Francis is going to approve of same-sex blessings, I don't think they're being fair to the evidence. But there are some problems that still remain, as I'm going to show. Fernandez replied, Look, just as I am firmly against abortion, and I challenge you to find someone in Latin America who has written more articles than me against abortion. Okay, good to know. I also understand that marriage, in the strict sense, is only one thing, that stable union of two beings as different as male and female are, who in that difference are capable of engendering new life. Okay, good. Good definition of marriage. And look, I appreciate that, but that isn't that's only half of the battle. Part of the battle is, yeah, not giving the sacrament of marriage to same-sex unions. That's part of the battle, right? So he's saying no, not on board with that. Okay, great. But the other problem is blessing same-sex unions, and specifically not the union itself, but maybe blessing some good found in them, such as, again, monogamy, fidelity, or friendship, or something like that. That's still a problem for the reasons why I've already mentioned. And I think that we're getting sidetracked by talking about, well, we want to make sure, yeah, this isn't sacramental in nature. Okay, well, fine. We've already acknowledged that. Let's move on. There's still another problem with this other issue, with these other propositions. That's my concern. I'm not concerned that there's going to be some sacramental right, you know, recognizing a sacramental validity to same-sex unions. I'm not concerned that that's on the table, but I am concerned about some of the other things that I think people are going to suggest. He says there is nothing that can be compared to that, and to use that name to express something else is neither good nor correct. At the same time, I believe that we must avoid gestures or actions that could express something different. That is why I think that the greatest care must be taken to avoid rites or blessings that could feed this confusion. Okay, fine. I think that's good. Yes, we want to avoid blessings that will blur the lines between a marriage and a non-marriage, and what is good and what is sinful. Sure. But that's not the entire battle here. Now, if a blessing is given in such a way that it does not cause that confusion, it will have to be analyzed and confirmed. Let me stop right there. If a blessing is given in such a way that it doesn't cause confusion, it will be analyzed and confirmed. Sure. But there's no way it can be. It will always cause confusion. That's the problem. And again, some might say, oh, but see, again, we're not blessing the union, we're blessing good found in these relationships. But wait, you're still causing confusion. So that problem still is going to remain. And likewise, I do have to ask the question, can we bless Satan insofar as we're just blessing his being? Because being is good. Can we then bless Satan in that sense? As long as it doesn't cause confusion that we're blessing his ministry, can we bless his being? You see how absurd this becomes. No, you can't do that. Can you bless my, if I have a satanic ritual with Satan and I am going to be monogamous to Satan, I'm dedicated to him in a marriage, a spiritual marriage, and I'm dedicated to him and I'm faithful to him. And, I have a friendship with him. And is monogamy, fidelity, friendship, are these good things? Yeah, but not in this context. So you can't bless those things in such a union. That's the problem. So what he's saying is, yeah, if you have a blessing in such a way that doesn't cause this confusion, it will have to be analyzed and confirmed. But with all due respect, your Archbishop, there is no such thing. There's no possible way to ever bless anything that is good found in these unions without causing confusion simultaneously. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's also nonsensical. Because why are we blessing good as if it's isolated and divorcing it from the context in which it's in? I have being, that is good. But what if I use my being to murder people every day? That's not good. Are you going to bless my being? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if I'm using my being to murder people, you're going to cause confusion and give people the impression that you're blessing the way in which I'm being. That's the problem. So I don't think that there's any way to entertain this. And that's where I'm going to have to offer some pushback against the Archbishop, with all due respect. Will some good come from these discussions? Yeah. You want to know what that good is? That we can't bless good isolated from the context in which they're in. That's the good that's going to come from this. Because somebody is going to push this. Some heretic is going to come out and push this, or even conference of bishops are going to push this to the point that the church has to come out and very clearly say, no, even though some things in some disordered relationships may be good, they're in the context of a disordered relationship, and thus they cannot be blessed, because you cannot isolate them from the context of which they're in any more than you can isolate somehow Satan's being from how he is being. That's the good that will come from this controversy. The church is going to have to fine tune itself and say, no, you can't do that. So stop entertaining this. Are we going to have to go through this long drawn out process? Unfortunately, yes. I don't think it's wise to entertain this discussion. If it were up to me, I would shut it down immediately. But it's not up to me. And so, okay, we're going to have to go through this the hard way. We're going to have to go through this long drawn out process. And then the church is going to have to say, no, we can't do this. Just kind of like the issue with Humanae Vitae, if you think about it. As you will see, there is a point at which we leave a properly theological discussion and move on to a question that is rather prudential or disciplinary. I understand the distinction, but you cannot separate the disciplinary and prudential question from the theology itself in this particular case, because at the very least, you have already a level of you're going to have an enormous level of confusion if this were to be done. At the very least. Not only that, but again, you can't isolate some virtuous aspects and divorce them from the context in which they exist. I do think that touches on theology. So I think that this position is untenable. The Doctrinal Office 2021 ruling set off a firestorm in parts of the Catholic world, especially Germany, where priests and pastoral workers held a day of protest during which they conducted blessing ceremonies attended by same-sex couples. Well, shame on them. The protest was criticized at the same time by Bishop Batzing, the chairman of Germany's Bishops' Conference, who said that blessing services were not suitable as an instrument for church political demonstrations or protest actions. Yeah, no, Batzing, that, again, with all due respect, that isn't the biggest problem here. The biggest problem is they were blessing sin, not necessarily that they're trying to use this as a political. No, that is an issue, but that's not the biggest issue. So I think we need to get our priorities in order. Batzing was one of the co-presidents of the Synodal Way, a 3-year initiative bringing together Germany's bishops and select lay people to discuss far-reaching changes to Catholic teaching and practice. Synodal Way members overwhelmingly endorsed a resolution backing same-sex blessings at their final assembly in March, which I've covered in multiple videos. In fact, I'll put them in the show notes if y'all haven't watched them already, but I've covered quite a few videos on the conference, the German Bishops' Conference, which I think was atrocious. The resolution called on bishops to officially allow blessing ceremonies in their diocese for couples who love each other, but to whom sacramental marriage is not accessible or who do not see themselves at a point of entering in a sacramental marriage. And how, again, here's how I think they're going to try to couch it. We're not blessing the union itself, but we're blessing the good things found in them, such as love, such as friendship. Okay, is love good? Is friendship good? Is fidelity good? Yeah, but you can't divorce it and isolate it from the context in which it's in. Any more than you can say, well, you had this guy who was a prophet many years ago and he loved a 9-year-old. Are you going to say that's a union that should be blessed? Or even today, should a 50-year-old be able to legally marry a 6-year-old? And should that be blessed? Should that union be blessed? Because there's somehow, love and fidelity here. Well, actually, let me make it a 7-year-old. They've reached the age of reason and they have consent to their will. And maybe society believes that, hey, all you really need at this point to really make a free decision is just have, the age of reason, 7 years old or so, and if society says it okay, is it now okay for the church to bless that union, a 50-year-old and a 7-year-old? Is that okay? It becomes absurd. if somebody were to say, no, we're not going to bless the union between the 50-year-old and the 7-year-old, but we will bless the good found in there insofar as there's love here, there's this there, there's that. It's absurd because you cannot isolate those from the context in which it is found. Again, being yoked to Baal, being yoked to Satan is not a good thing. Being yoked can be a very good thing, right? Sure. But being yoked to Satan is not a good thing. So we're going to now bless the goodness of being yoked for those who are yoked with Satan? No, this is absurd. It also appealed for the creation of a manual including same-sex blessings and consolation with the German Liturgical Institute. The German Bishops' Conference and the Lay Central Committee of German Catholics, the bodies that jointly sponsored the Synodal Way, announced this week that the formation of a working group dedicated to preparing the blessing manual. The Synodal Way resolution on blessings was passed immediately after the Belgian bishops. Belgian Bishop Johan Bonny addressed the assembly. He explained how the country's Flemish bishops came to approve a text allowing for a ritual blessing of same-sex couples in September of 2021. Also, in dissent against the Magisterium, openly in dissent against Rome and Pope Francis, as we've seen. He noted that the final part of the document addressed the possibility of a blessing. The section headed "Prayer for Love and Faithfulness." You see what I'm saying? You see how I think people are going to try to make these distinctions? Oh, we're just praying for the love and faithfulness in these unions. We're not praying for anything sinful or disordered in the unions. I think I've shown 100 times already in this video why that doesn't work. So I'm not going to continue to repeat it. But you can see where they're going with this. That's the problem. Suggested a structure for a ceremony taking place in the presence of a community, but underlined that the difference should remain clear with what the church understands by sacramental marriage. That's not good enough. Just saying, hey, this is different from the sacramental marriage isn't good enough, because at the end of the day, there will still be confusion, there will still be scandal, and it still will be understood as blessing sin. And again, you can't bless any good isolated from the context in which it's in. It's a bit to help the Vatican because it says it's not the sacramental marriage, it's something new, Bonny said, according to a Synodal Way representative who simultaneously translated March 10th speech from German to English. That's a really bad argument, because if you just look at what Pope Francis and the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith said back in 2021 when it said it can't bless sin, it gave the context, and it wasn't saying, oh, it's just because we're somehow distorting sacramental marriage and the difference between a sacramental marriage and something that's other than that. That wasn't it. If you go and read the rationale behind it, it was saying that, no, this entire union itself is in and of itself disordered and therefore cannot be blessed. So it wasn't like, oh, we can't bless it because it may be confused with marriages. That wasn't the point. So honestly, feel like maybe Bishop Bonny didn't actually read the thing, or is just failing to engage it, one of the two. Bonny stressed that the Flemish bishops did not offer a manual, but only a short scheme or model that would be reviewed after 1 or 2 years. The Vatican has made no public comment on the Flemish bishops' text, and I think that's a problem. I think that's an issue. But Bonny said that curial officials were really open-minded when they received Belgian bishops on their ad limina visit in November of 2022. I don't see that being the case. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe like 1 or 2 guys at the Vatican was open to this, but I don't see that being predominantly the case, especially in light of what the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith said in 2021. So maybe like 1 or 2 guys was open to this, but everybody said that it is an important matter, and it's your bishop's conference. It's your decision, Bonny recalled. Here's something interesting. He says this. He claimed that the Pope neither said yes or no to the Flemish bishop's document, but only it's your area of responsibility, it's your domain. I don't believe that. I don't believe he said that. With all due respect to him, don't believe he said that. Because it makes no sense in light of what we do know he said and what we can verify, and that is, again, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and what it said in response to the dubia, or the dubium. So I have Bonnie's word on what Pope Francis said versus what I can actually verify to be what Pope Francis actually said. I'm sorry, I'm going to go with the official documents of the Magisterium. The Doctrinal Office's 2021 declaration says that it was not listed to impart a blessing on relationships or partnerships, even stable. You see, the congregation was already anticipating these things. Yes, you might find something good in these unions. It's stable, they're faithful, but it's disordered. And so you can't bless things like stable unions when it's a disordered union any more than you can bless a stable relationship between me and Satan. Even stable that involves sexual activity outside of marriage, as in the case of the unions between persons of the same sex. It added the presence in such relationships of positive elements which are in themselves to be valued and appreciated. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm getting this from? And appreciated cannot justify these relationships and render them legitimate objects of an ecclesial blessing, since the positive elements exist within the context of a union not ordered to the Creator's plan. That's exactly what I've been saying. And I was actually saying this before the CDF, not that somehow it takes a genius to say these things. I think it's kind of common sense. But the CDF is saying the same thing. Pope Francis is saying the same thing. So even if somebody wants to say, okay, all right, well, fine. Pope Francis said no to blessing same-sex unions, but we're going to push for this notion of let's bless something in them that is good while not blessing the sin itself. Pope Francis already said no to that as well, because that was in the document. And Pope Francis was aware of that and approved of its publication. So Pope Francis has already shut the door on that too. Why continue to allow more discussions on this? I don't know. The only way that I could think that one would still have more discussions on this, it kind of reminds me of Pope Leo the Great and the Council of Chalcedon. Pope Leo the Great already settled the issue of the two natures in his tome prior to the Council of Chalcedon, but the emperor already called the council, and the Pope just went ahead and acquiesced to the council and, sent representatives, sent legates. But he felt like it's let me walk that back. He didn't feel it was useless. He felt it's a little redundant because his tome already settled the issue infallibly. However, he did still feel it was beneficial for the bishops to come together in Chalcedon to discuss his tome so that they could express their support for it, not to necessarily dissent from it. There was a small group of people who had questions about it at first, and then they were given explanations about it, and then they were on board with it, and they accepted the tome. And Pope Leo said he's cool with the ecumenical council so that a fuller judgment may be issued. That is, not just a judgment, an infallible judgment nonetheless, coming from the Bishop of Rome, but so that the entire church can get on board with this thing. All of the bishops can get on board so that a fuller judgment can be expressed. Okay. Now that's a little different than a synod of bishops, because the synod of bishops is not anything remotely even close to a ecumenical council, because it's not even a council at all. It's an advisory body. It's not a council of bishops. So there obviously are some differences here, but it could be that his intention is to, okay, let's have a discussion and let's see if we can all get on the same page on this issue. But I don't think that Pope Francis is going to approve of any qualifications to this. I don't think he's going to approve of it in any way, because he's already shut the door on the entire thing in 2021. So the only reason why he would even entertain these discussions, in my opinion, would be to try to get people on board with this, to have a dialogue, to have a conversation. And in the midst of that, hopefully, people can then get on a board. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he hasn't disciplined the German bishops, hoping that he can get them on board before a major schism is caused. I feel like it may already be too late for that. The text said that since blessings on persons are in relationships with the sacraments, the blessing of homosexual unions cannot be considered illicit. This is because they would constitute a certain imitation or analog of the nuptial blessing invoked on the man and woman united in the sacrament of matrimony, while in fact there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and family. The document says, citing Pope Francis's 2016 Apostolic Exhortation Amoris Laetitia, a text that Archbishop Fernandez is widely credited with helping to draft. Think about that. Fernandez helped draft Amoris Laetitia, which is cited to shut the door on this, and Pope Francis authorized its publication, and it's now part of the Papal Magisterium in common form. The text continued. The declaration of the unlawfulness of blessings of unions between persons of the same sex is not, therefore, and it is not intended to be a form of unjust discrimination, but rather a reminder of the truth of the liturgical rite and of the very nature of sacramentals as the Church understands them. Well said. The doctrinal dicastery noted that its declaration did not preclude the blessings given to individual persons with homosexual inclinations who manifest the will to live in fidelity to the revealed plans of God as proposed by church teaching. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's really no different than just giving somebody a regular blessing. So, okay. Rather, it declares illicit any form of blessing that tends to acknowledge their unions as such. In this case, in fact, the blessing would manifest not the intention to entrust such individual persons to the protection and help of God in the sense mentioned above, but to approve and encourage a choice and a way of life that cannot be recognized as objectively ordered to the revealed plans of God, it said. Again, very well said. I think the document itself in 2021 has already settled this issue. And so the only thing that we really have the dialogue about is reception of that document. In the Info Vaticana interview, Fernandez was also asked about Germany's synodal way, which is promoted repeated interventions from Vatican departments, including the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. So he's asked about, what do you think about this issue in Germany? What's going on there in Germany? Fernandez explained that he had not followed the initiative closely due to his responsibilities as the leader of the Argentine Archdiocese of La Plata. He said that he needed to catch up on the matter, to listen, to talk, to consult. Okay, well, I've already caught up on the matter. I can tell you right now, it was atrocious. The things that the German bishops were saying as justification was absolutely atrocious. And so whenever he catches up on it, I hope he will see that. For now, I have to tell you that I don't think there isn't something good in this German movement, he commented. Now, at first, when I first read that, I thought, what? But I get what he's saying. Actually, watch what he's saying here. He said that Cardinal Louis Ferrar, his predecessor as DDF prefect, once told him that he wished there were some heretic who would force us to deepen our faith. Okay. This historical question will leave us with something good, even though it may be necessary to polish things, to clarify them, to mature them, Fernandez says. So in other words, what he's saying is he thinks some good is going to come from the German movement. What is that good? It's going to force us to polish and refine our faith, and he likens it to a heretic forcing us to deepen our faith. So here the analogy is the German bishops are, in the analogy, the heretic. All right, fair enough. I can agree. I do think that there will be some good that comes for the German movement. Of course, God will always bring good out of evil. I absolutely believe that. And what exactly will that be? Just what he said. It's going to force us to fine-tune and sharpen our position here. What will that be? I think we're going to have to basically receive fully what Rome has already said in 2021. You can't isolate something good from a disordered union and bless that, such as stability. You can't do that. It's not going to work. And are the German bishops forcing the church to do this very thing, to clarify itself, to, polish things? Yeah, I think that they are pushing the envelope. At what cost? Well, could be at the cost of schism. So I don't think it's justified in any way. But certainly, I think that's what's going to happen. And so I do believe what's going to happen from this is the church is going to become stronger and is going to fine tune its arguments and is effectively going to say what Roman already said in 2021. So again, do I think Pope Francis is going to approve of same-sex blessings? No. Do I think that some people are going to try to push for blessing something good found in these disordered unions? I think people are going to push for that. Some will push that for that at the Synod. The German bishops, I think, are going to push for that. I think that's going to be on the table for some people. I think it will be discussed, and I think ultimately Pope Francis is going to once again shut the door on that in his post-apostolic exhortation, or at least I think that's what he should do. But given his track record, given what he's already done, given what he's already said in 2021, I expect that to be what he's going to say in his post-apostolic exhortation, because frankly, I don't think there's anything that the Synod of Bishops is going to be able to say to overturn what the congregation has already said on this issue. The congregation had very strong arguments, and everything that I have ever seen come from the group that is pushing for same-sex blessings, they're devoid of any theological argumentation. It's atrocious. So I don't think they're going to offer anything to overturn anything we've seen from the CDF. So I don't think Pope Francis is going to approve of this. So that's my take on it. Let's certainly pray for the church and for, the magisterium to, uphold the faith, And so, that's my take on it. If you did enjoy this, I want you to hit the like button and the subscribe button, especially. Help share this on social media. But like I said, the more you interact with this, like subscribing or liking or perhaps commenting in the comment section, the more YouTube will share this with others. So if you felt this was a beneficial video, you think people need to be reached with this message, interact with it, because that way YouTube will share it with more people, especially by, again, hitting the subscribe button, like, comment. And if you really want to support me beyond that, check me out at patreon.com/reason and theology. You'll get access to extra content there, and you'll especially be supporting me because this is the primary way that I, take care of my family. So I would appreciate it if you can help out in any way. Also, check out my book, Church Chaos, at reasonandtheology.com for a free copy. Again, free copy, reasonandtheology.com, Church Chaos. It's a book all about the confusion in the Catholic Church and how to cut through the confusion. So certainly check it out. All right, we'll see you later. God bless. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com. So Reason and Theology is growing as a channel. As a result, there's been a number of increases in production costs. So if you're benefiting from RNT, I ask that you consider supporting the channel. You can help out by contributing to the Help RNT Grow fundraiser on GoFundMe. You could also consider becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Reason and Theology, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. With either of these options, Patreon or a YouTube member, you'll get extra access to patron-only content. You can also donate directly to RNT at PayPal if you prefer that option. And you can find links to all of these resources and ways to support RNT in the show description. God bless. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. See you next time. God bless.